Josh Matthews picked Bobby Lashley, Bram, Eli Drake, and Tyrus. I like all those guys. They're real good. Especially, Bobby Lashley, we know he's real good. He's real dominant. He's one of the toughest men in that match and one of the most dominant. So is Tyrus, but as of late, since his TNA run, he hasn't been as dominant. But, we know he's real good, and he can be a pretty dominant guy when he used to right, but, as of late, since his TNA run, they haven't really given him that much of a chance to shine, like in WWE. And JB also picked his team. A lot of shocking returns. But yeah, he picked Alberto El Patron, who debuted at Impact about a month ago, actually a month and a half or two ago. And he picked, and JB picked the three guys who are returning to pro wrestling, go on TV anyways. He picked the returning Matt Morgan, and we haven't seen him since like 2015 or 14, since his wife got pregnant and had a kid, or was gonna have the kid, and he wanted to be there for his son, so that's why he's been gone for a while and been off of TV. But he's back now. He came back and Josh Matthews picked him. JB picked him to be a part of his team, and the second man, the third man, or one of the men was Chris Aldonis. He picked returning Chris Masters. He's been on TNA TV before, but that was a part of the GFW invasion. But he wasn't a part of the TNA Impact Wrestling roster, but he was a part of the GFW roster that invaded Impact Wrestling. But Adonis came to help JB, a part of his team, and to be a part of his team and help, JB, with his team face off against Josh Matthews, going on to the next week, April 13th episode of Impact Wrestling. And the fourth man JB had that came back on the April 13th, 2017 edition of Impact Wrestling was Magnus, since all the men were in the ring fighting, and Josh Matthews' team, Bobby Lashley, Bram, and Eli Drake, and Tyrus were ganging up and beating up Alberto El Patron, or Alberto Del Rio, as in WWE, Matt Morgan and Chris Aldonis. They were beating on them. Josh Matthews' team was beating on JB's team, and Magnus came back to even up the odds 4-on-4. And JB's team sent Josh Matthews' team, on a retreat, to retreat. And it was pretty good. It was cool seeing Magnus come back to TNA. That was one of the greatest moments in TNA history, I never, I kind of thought Magnus might come back one day, but I wasn't sure, It seems like when it got for a while, even a year and a half or two, even 1 year, it seems like they're never going to come back. Or, are you wondering, they're going to come back anytime soon, or 10 years down the line, 5 years? Since Magnus, especially him, he was in Global Force Wrestling, but never got the TV deal. You know how that was, But, I thought Global Force was going to go on TV and Magnus would be there for forever, but he's back now. Okay, now let's take some back. We're back on the April 13th, 2017 edition of Impact Wrestling. Okay, lastly, Josh's team, Bobby Lashley, Bram, Eli Drake, and Tyrus face Magnus Alberto El Patron, Matt Morgan, and Chris Aldonis. It was a pretty good match. I wouldn't give it 4 or 5 stars. 3, maybe 2.5 stars. Probably give 1 to 2 stars. I would say it's in between 1 to 2.5 stars. It was a real good match, Not the greatest match of all time, but most of the match, maybe half of it or a third of the match, they were all ganging up on Chris Aldonis, Chris Masters, but it was a really good match. It was very entertaining, and I like seeing these two guys in the ring on TV for the first time. Whenever Eli Drake and Magnus were both in the ring, they're two of my favorite guys, and they're very alike. To me, they're very similar, their looks are almost the same, they're very similar, especially Eli Drake with his hair grown out, and, the build is kind of similar, and characters were a little bit different. Yeah. Magnus is British too, and Eli Drake's American, and yeah, they kind of remind me of each other, you know, the way they, maybe not the way they wrestle, but just the way their build is. You know, they both wear men's tights like most men wear in the wrestling ring, but, you know, I don't know, they look very similar though on their looks mainly, but the way they have their hair, you know, they look very similar, but that's just me, you know, but I can see Eli Drake as a world champion, and Magnus, he should be TNA world champion or Impact Wrestling world champion one day again. But he's a Global Force Wrestling champion, you know, seeing as Global Force, you know, I mean, how TNA brought him in from Global Force Wrestling, and Global Force Wrestling, well, might not happen after all. I'll get into that later, or one of the next shows, or later on in this one. It just depends. But yeah, it'd be a pretty good match, you know. I mean, that'd be a pretty good match though between Eli Drake and Magnus. You know, I'd like to see a singles match, you know, between them two. You know, I think it could pull off a 5-star match. You know, I remember Eli Drake and EC3 had a pretty good match a couple months back in December or November. Eli Drake had a stop talking for the remainder of 2016 if he lost the match, and if, you know, Eli Drake won, EC3 would never be able to challenge for the world title again or something like that, you know, on EC3's part or whatever. But yeah, Eli Drake and Magnus, I can see them. They can have a real good rivalry. They can have a rivalry of the year and TNA on the Impact Wrestling. You know, they're two very talented wrestlers, you know, both charismatic, and, you know, a lot of fans like both of them, especially Magnus. You know, he's been in for a while. He's got a lot of star power, very great. You know, Eli Drake, you know, he's really winning them over real fast. You know, he's a very good talent, and I hope he wins the world title this year. By the way, Magnus, Alberto El Patron, Matt Morgan, and Chris Adonis beats Tyrus, Eli Drake, Bram, and Lashley. Yeah, JB's team beat Josh Matthews' team. By the way, in the April 13th episode of Impact, that Andrew Everett won,